Humans are not built for the sea. The ocean, vast and beautiful, is as unforgiving as it is captivating. Above the surface, the waves shimmer in the sunlight, offering the illusion of serenity. But below lies an abyss, dark, cold, and indifferent to our presence. Every time we venture into its domain, we're taking a risk, often greater than we realize. In this week's video, we'll explore two stories of survival at sea. Stories that remind us of the ocean's power and our own fragility. These tales are cautionary lessons, urging us to respect the unpredictable nature of the water. Our first story begins on June 1st, 2016, with a man named Bill. At 60 years old, Bill was a seasoned adventurer. He'd been a FedEx pilot, a former naval aviator, and an experienced fisherman. Fishing wasn't just a pastime for him, it was a way of life. That morning, Bill prepared for what seemed like the perfect solo fishing trip. It was the first day of grouper season, and the Gulf of Mexico was calling. The skies were clear, the seas calm, conditions that seemed ideal. He carefully untied his 22-foot Grady white boat from the dock behind his vacation home and set off, eager to make the most of the day. But there's one crucial thing Bill didn't bring with him: safety gear. No life jacket, no emergency flares, no radio. He trusted his skills, his experience, and the weather forecast. And that trust would soon be tested in ways he never imagined. Bill sailed 25 miles offshore, relishing the solitude and the thrill of the catch. By midday, he had already reeled in 2 large groupers and was preparing to cast his line again. But then, the day took a fateful turn. The boat's engine wasn't in neutral, and as Bill tugged on his line, the tension sent him tumbling overboard. Imagine that moment. One second, you're in control, standing on your boat. The next, you're in the water, watching as your boat drifts away, the engine humming steadily. Lone, 25 miles from shore, with no supplies and no way to call for help. Bill knew he couldn't afford to panic. With his naval training kicking in, he focused on survival. He oriented himself east, toward the shore, and began swimming. He alternated between floating and slow, deliberate strokes, conserving energy and keeping his face above water. But the ocean is relentless. The sun blazed overhead, the waves pushed against him, and thirst gnawed at him. Hours passed, each one feeling longer than the last. Bill thought about his wife. When she would notice he was missing, how long it would take for the Coast Guard to start searching. By 8:30 p.m., Bill's wife returned home and found the house empty. Concerned, she called the Coast Guard and the search began. But out on the water, Bill faced despair. A boat appeared on the horizon, and for a moment, hope surged. He screamed, waved, jumped, doing everything he could to get their attention, but the boat sailed on, oblivious to his cries. Night fell, bringing with it a new kind of terror. The darkness was absolute, the kind that disorients and isolates. Bill had to fight not just the waves, but his own mind, keeping himself focused and alert. He watched the stars and the glow of his wristwatch, anchoring himself to the passage of time. By dawn, after 20 hours in the water, Bill's body was nearing its limit. His tongue had swollen, his skin was raw from the sun and salt, and his mind was clouded by exhaustion. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a drone hovering above him. A Coast Guard search team. Moments later, a helicopter appeared, and Bill was finally rescued. The bright yellow shirt he wore had made him visible from the air. A small but life-saving detail. Bill later reflected on his ordeal, vowing never to fish without safety gear again. He now owns multiple self-inflating life jackets and remains eternally grateful to the Coast Guard for their relentless efforts. Our second story takes us back to February 28, 2009, with a group of 4 friends: Nick, Will, Corey, and Marquis. These men were young, strong, and adventurous. Nick was a personal trainer, Will was his best friend, and Corey and Marquis were NFL players who had become friends with Nick at the gym. That Saturday morning, the group set off from Clearwater, Florida, for a day of fishing in the Gulf of Mexico. The weather was rough and cold, with a cold front approaching, but the group wasn't worried. They planned to stay out for just a few hours. By evening, after a successful day of fishing, it was time to head back. But then their anchor got stuck, a frustrating repeat of their last fishing trip. Determined not to lose another anchor, they tied the line to the stern and hit the engine, hoping the force would free it. It was a disastrous decision. The rear of the boat dipped underwater, and within seconds the vessel capsized, throwing all 4 men into the freezing 17-degree water. Shock set in immediately. They managed to climb onto the overturned hull, but with no food, no water, and no way to call for help. They were in a dire situation. The cold was relentless, sapping their strength and willpower. As night fell, the true horror began. Hypothermia set in, affecting each man differently. Kiz was the first to succumb. He began hallucinating, talking about going under the boat or retrieving the anchor. Despite Nick's desperate attempts to hold on to him, Marquis slipped away, disappearing into the waves. Next was Corey. His hypothermia manifested as aggression. He shouted nonsensically, tore off his life jacket, and dove into the water, vanishing beneath the surface. By dawn, only Nick and Will remained. Exhausted and starving, they managed to retrieve a small bag of pretzels and a sports drink from the submerged boat. But Will began showing the same symptoms as the others. He stopped climbing back onto the hull, and eventually he too was gone. For 43 hours, Nick clung to the overturned boat, hallucinating and fading in and out of consciousness. When rescue finally arrived, Nick was barely aware of their presence. He thought he was hallucinating until the rescuers touched him. Nick survived, but the emotional toll was immense. He later wrote a book, Not Without Hope, to honor his friends and share their story. His experience serves as a powerful reminder of the ocean's power and the importance of preparation. What can we learn from these stories? First, respect the sea. Even experienced sailors and athletes are no match for its unpredictability. Second, always bring safety gear. Life jackets, flares, and radios aren't optional. They're essential. And finally, never underestimate how quickly things can go wrong. A single mistake can spiral into disaster. Thank you for watching. If these stories resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe. They remind us not only of our fragility, but also of our resilience. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.